Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 5 of this Pokemon adventure. We're starting off today with some trading. I wanted to trade some Pokemon from Yellow over to Red, because she's going to be leveling up Bulbasaur and Squirtle for a little while, so I thought it would be easier and more convenient to use Pokemon Stadium to do the trading instead of setting up that Game Boy emulator and everything. Of course, I had to set up an N64 emulator, which means the graphics are going to look a little weird because I don't really know a lot about setting up the graphics for a Nintendo 64 emulator. You'd think you would just push a few buttons and it works instantly, but it's not that easy, so things might look a little strange, but you only have to bear with it for a little while before we get back to the action anyways. And while I'm at it, one thing that's really annoying about completing the Pokédex in Generation 1, you have to get the starters unevolved, because if you get the evolved forms of the starters onto your game, then there's no way to get the unevolved forms. Breeding hasn't been introduced yet, so that's kind of annoying. That goes for the fossil Pokemon as well. They must be received unevolved, or else those Pokédex entries are going to remain blank until you do. Now, I've moved over to Yellow version because I think Yellow deserves a little bit more screen time because he worked very hard in getting all of the coins from the casino that I would need to exchange for all of the prize Pokemon that I need. Now, I'm going to have to ask all of you to not worry too much about where all of these coins came from, and I'm also going to have to ask not to ask questions about how Yellow suddenly has more coins than the coin case is capable of holding. I mean, you could just assume that I got very lucky at the slots, but also remember that I don't want to take forever to get a Porygon because the thing costs 9,999 in this version. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking making them cost so much. There are TMs available here as well, but they cost so many coins that you're better off just buying the coins directly, and that costs like hundreds of thousands of Pokédollars, so I really don't know what they were thinking with that. And you have to do it for Dex completion too. This is the only way to get a Porygon. So, like, I think you would understand if maybe there was some funny business going on in the background. That's all I'm gonna say. Anyways, there's some hidden items that I forgot to pick up in this underground path. I have no idea how anyone is supposed to find these without just randomly tapping A, but if you just hold the direction and randomly tap A, then the game is not going to register some of those A button presses and you'll probably miss the item anyways. So, yeah, even the item finder would not pinpoint the exact location of these items, so who knows how you're supposed to get them on your own. Now then, our next order of business is to get Pikachu a new move. He's very close to learning a new move, so I decided to take the time to get some extra EXP and get him that new move. It's actually pretty interesting what happens when he gets it. So this girl says they must look silly standing there like that, but if that's the case, then why are you guys standing there like that anyways? That's really weird. What a weird formation of trainers. Anyway, this girl has 5 Pokemon, and they're all cannon fodder. So this is going to take a while. I'm just going to knock out this first Pidgey, and then we will move on to the end of the battle, where Pikachu will have a special reaction to learning this new move. You're going to see what move it is immediately after I KO this Pidgey. Pidgey is going to hit the deck, and Pikachu is going to hit level 26 and learn Thunderbolt, which you might remember was the TM that Lieutenant Surge gave to us. So we didn't need to use it on Pikachu because he was going to learn the move naturally anyways. Thunderbolt is a more powerful version of Thundershock and has the same paralysis effect, and I've also heard that it can cause a sound bug in its original Game Boy incarnation, but I've never really encountered that, so I've never seen the sound bug. I do know, however, that in the Virtual Console releases, they actually reduced the amount of screen flashing in the move's animation. No doubt they were concerned about the possibility of triggering a seizure, which is something they've been concerned about ever since that infamous episode of the TV show. You know the one. And by the way, this is your daily reminder that Porygon did nothing wrong and it was Pikachu that caused that explosion. And you don't see him getting airbrushed out of existence. Oh no, we gotta pin this on Porygon for some reason. Even though it was just one episode and there's no reason to just censor out an entire character because of it. I don't know. Anyways, you can see that all of my ranting has made Pikachu very upset, so I better catch up with the video. We have entered the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town, and for a lot of people, this was probably a very iconic moment in the game, far more spooky than anything they'd seen previously, of course. Especially for what's supposed to be a kid's game, allegedly. Anytime they tell you Pokemon is for children, show them Lavender Town, because this one town, despite not having a Pokemon gym, houses some of the scariest stuff the game has to offer. In Yellow version, this rival battle has little of interest, so I will talk about something else instead. So the entire Pokemon Tower carries many themes of death and surprisingly violent comments from some of the trainers. And then we have the rival making a weird comment about how our Pokemon don't look dead, but he can certainly make them faint. This was way more aggressive than the rival had shown himself to be up to this point. Players also made another observation about the team the rival is using in this fight. In previous battles, he was using a Rattata in yellow version or a Raticate in red and blue, but he doesn't have one in this fight, and he also has only 5 Pokemon instead of 6, which is the maximum a trainer is allowed to have. Putting this all together with the fact that this fight takes place in a shrine for the dead, it wasn't too much of a stretch to make the connection that the player might have accidentally killed Raticate, or Raticate had died somehow between this fight and the last one. Now, normally I am not a huge fan of fan theories like that because I think it's silly to try and make a Nintendo game way darker than it's meant to be, but in this case I think such a fan theory speaks to the fanbase's ability to craft a narrative out of what's actually a really simple story with not that interesting characters. I mean, I think the reason the story in Generation 1 is so dry is because, well, first of all, they don't have a lot of space for text, but also, they leave a lot of stuff open to interpretation so that the player can make their own story out of what they're seeing on the screen. And this particular fan theory has led to some interesting narratives being created surrounding the rival character, so what I'm getting at with all of this is that I think fan theories can create some interesting headcanons, but I would not want them to be official canon in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, fan theories are fun, just don't take them as the actual canon, because there's no way that's the case. Anyways, getting back to the actual gameplay, this is the point at which the rival starts varying up his team based on which starter he picked at the beginning. If he did not pick Squirtle, he will have Gyarados. If he did not pick Charmander, he will have Growlithe, and if he did not pick Bulbasaur, he will have Execute. Of the 3 of these, Execute is probably the strongest, so if he picked Bulbasaur at the start, then that's yet another reason why picking the water starter is the best, because it gives him the worst starter and eliminates the biggest threat from his other teams. How interesting. At any rate, you can see that my strategy of just running over the enemies with the types that are super effective against them hasn't changed that much. Although in green version, the rival's Charmeleon has now learned Rage, so if he decides to use Rage at the start, then you basically win. You can use Leech Seed and then just use Bide to deal back all of that damage at once so you don't risk increasing his attack power, and it's kind of funny that it works out that way, to be honest. Bide is still being useful, and it's going to continue being useful. So, back over to yellow version, we see that Eevee still hasn't evolved. It's amazing that the rival takes so long in yellow version to evolve as Eevee. But you know what's not going to take forever to evolve? Well, now that Mankey has hit level 28, that so happens to be his moment to evolve into Primeape. So yes, now we officially have a Pokemon that Ash used in the show, because he did catch Primeape directly, didn't he? Or did the Mankey evolve into Primeape and then it was captured? Yeah, I think that's what happened. My memory is not the best, but now it's time for Primeape to learn Rage, which is a move that you probably don't want to learn in the Pokemon Tower, because we are about to face some Ghost Pokemon. Ghost types are actually really, really strange. In Generation 1, there is only one evolution line of Ghost types, so it's not exactly a very prominent type, and there are a bunch of problems with the type itself that will take a while to explain, so I'll wait until we actually start fighting them. But something that I think is interesting to point out is that despite the fact that Game Freak keeps insisting that Pokemon is a kid's game, the ghost types throughout the series still maintain that creep factor that is very prevalent in Lavender Town in the original generation, so they kind of still hold true to that tradition of ghosts being really spooky. I mean, they should be, of course, but some of the Dex entries, oh boy, it makes you wonder who's writing them and if there is any truth to them. I mean, just the fact that they're ghost type makes me wonder if they're actually dead or if they're just somewhat like what we expect a ghost to be like. I don't know. So let's talk about ghost Pokemon. The first thing you should know is that ghost Pokemon are completely immune to the normal and fighting types. This alone makes them very worth having because some of the strongest attacks in the game are normal types, so just outright being immune to them is so worth it that I think all 4 characters are going to capture a Ghastly here, including Yellow. Now, Ash kind of had a Haunter in the TV show, which is the evolved form of Ghastly, but he was really only around for 1 episode before going off to wherever, so if that counts as Ash owning a Haunter, then I guess I could capture and use this Ghastly with Yellow. You be the judge, let me know in the comments. I haven't really used him that much yet. Now, every trainer in the entire tower just has Ghastly, so you don't really need to worry about them that much. If you can defeat one of them, you can defeat any of them. Just use your non-normal and fighting type attacks. Even though flying and poison are physical moves, they can still hit Ghastly, which doesn't make a lot of sense. If normal and fighting can't hit him, then I don't know why flying can. It's implied that the trainers here are being possessed by their own ghost types, which is very spooky to think about, and they have some very choice lines, which I have screen capped and will show you throughout this video. Again, anyone tries to tell you Pokemon is a kid's game, show them this area. You see this? This line right here. No surprise that it got censored in the remakes, along with a bunch of other stuff that really shouldn't have been censored, but what can you do? I mean, Fire Red still has that casino, so why you would get rid of the Gambler trainer class is beyond me. You can also find Wild Cubone in this tower, which raises all sorts of questions considering the plot of this area, but I had problems catching it because first my box was full, and then I accidentally KO'd the next Cubone I ran into, but I did eventually catch one. Cubone are also very spooky in particular because they're said to wear the skeletons of their mother's dead bodies on their heads. What is this game? On a lighter note, Cubone is also theorized to be the child that you see in a Kangaskhan's pouch, because in later generations when you hatch a Kangaskhan, they apparently hatch with a child already in their pouch that never grows old and leaves, yada yada yada, you've heard all of this before. Speaking of parents, at the top of the tower you can find the ghost of Marowak, which is the mother of Cubone and also its evolved form. There's no way to identify this ghost without the Sylph Scope, so that's what you needed the Sylph Scope for. And there's no way past this ghost without it. Normally. You also cannot capture this Marowak in particular because it's kind of dead, but then again, it's still vulnerable to your normal and fighting type attacks, so it's technically not a ghost type even though it is an actual ghost, and can be hit by your physical and special attacks, and I don't know, you're just supposed to knock it out and move on, so I suppose we should just do that. This is so strange. Like, this is the only time in the whole series that you fight a literal ghost. Unless I am missing something entirely, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. It would be very strange for them to implement such an event at this point in Pokemon history. Oh, and in case you need another reason Team Rocket are actually effective villains in this game, they're implied to be the ones who killed Marowak and took her skull. Yeah, in this generation, Team Rocket actually does nasty stuff and gets things done. It's actually pretty impressive. So naturally, Charmeleon here is about to go on a rampage and obliterate this guy's entire team of Zubats. Yeah, the Rocket Grunts are still kind of cannon fodder at this point in the game. They really don't have any excellent Pokemon. I guess they are just not good at stealing them. Also, Charmeleon learns Slash, which is a normal type move that has a high crit rate, much like Karate Chop. Which kind of makes you wonder what the point of Karate Chop was, but I digress. So Golbat here can actually survive a Slash, but it's way too low level to survive another one. The Pokemon from here on out, they're kind of low level and not always evolved, which I think is unfortunate because at this point Charmeleon has gained a lot of experience. He's up to level 36, which is pretty high for what the enemies expect him to be at this point. And at level 36, of course, that gives Charmeleon his final evolution. Red finally has the third form of Charmander, the ever-famous Charizard, who is something of an icon for the series, second only to Pikachu if you ask me. Which is not always a good thing. Now, over in Green version, Green never picked up the Sylph Scope, so he's not going to be able to identify any of the enemies. They all show up as this ghost, and though you can reveal their sprites by going into the menu and viewing one of your own Pokemon status screens, you just can't attack them or do anything with them. None of your Pokemon can fight because they're too scared, and yes, that means even the mighty Charizard and Mewtwo cannot fight the ghost because they're just that scared. Isn't that amazing? So that also means there's no way for Green to get past the Marowak ghost. No way at all. Wait, what happened? Green used a Pokédoll and that counts as getting past the Marowak ghost? The Pokédoll is an item that lets you escape random encounters, so... Wow, I guess that counts as getting past the Marowak ghost without the Sylph Scope. Wow, okay. Moving on to yellow version, in this area, they added another encounter with Jesse and James, which means in this part of the game, instead of getting 3 cannon fodder rocket grunts, there's going to be just 1 cannon fodder rocket grunt, or 2 of them. It's 2 people, but it's 1 battle. I don't know. Our newly evolved Primeape is basically going to sweep their entire team. I almost contemplated using Rage against these guys because they're not immune to any of my normal and fighting type attacks. But yeah, low kick deals with them pretty efficiently. Meowth goes down in basically 1 hit, and the newly evolved Arbok and Weezing aren't that much different. I think Arbok still has the wrap attack that Ekans had, but it's not going to be fast enough to actually pull it out. By the way, for the 5 people who haven't noticed yet, Ekans spelled backwards, Arbok spelled backwards, Muck spelled backwards, X-nay on that last one. Yes, I am very funny and entertaining guy, trying to cover for the fact that I have nothing to say about this fight. Maybe Weezing will do something interesting? It's still pretty low level. I mean, Yellow's pretty much at the same level as these enemies, but Yellow hasn't had nearly as much EXP grinding as the other teams have. I'm still dreading all of that EXP grinding I have to do as Red in order to evolve all of her Pokemon. That's not going to be fun. In fact, come to think of it, the fact that you fight Arbok and Weezing so many times kind of explains the changes to one of the gym leaders later on. In fact, we'll be fighting that gym leader in this video, and oops, Primeape got crit, apparently. So, let's bring in Pikachu to finish the job. You can see why they wanted to tone down the flashing on Thunderbolt. That's a lot of flashing that it does. And Pikachu is going to get poisoned again. I keep letting Pikachu get poisoned for some reason, but you know, when you're fighting this many poison types, did you know that there are 33 poison types in Generation 1, which is like a 1/5 of the entire roster? That's a lot of poison. So strange. Anyways, with the rockets out of the way, we can talk to Mr. Fuji, who was apparently being held hostage and forced into, doing something. I really don't know what. Well, whatever he was doing, he actually gives us an instant teleport back to his house, which is nice because if I had to walk all the way back down, Pikachu would have been KO'd by the poison, and that would have just tanked our relationship, I think. He's got a reward for us, but I have to throw out an item in order to make room for it. Yes, of course. In the tower, you can actually pick up an Awakening, which cures sleep status, which is really strange because the item he gives you, it cures sleep status anyways, and it's infinitely reusable. The Poke Flute is apparently something like a dog whistle. It makes a sound that only the Pokemon can hear, but whenever you play it, it plays a little tune, so I don't know what's up with that. Can the human hear it too? So, with the Poke Flute, we can now fix the problem of the sleeping Pokemon blocking our way to other routes, so Blue is going to head that away, but before he actually plays the flute for the Pokemon, there is a little side path you can explore here as well by cutting through that tree and then somehow realizing that you can go through the building, and you can find this girl. Apparently she is some kind of celebrity in hiding or something like that, and she gives you the HM for the move Fly. Fly is a 2-turn move like Dig. It makes you invincible on the first turn and then attacks on the second turn. It's not nearly as useful as Dig. Fly is just not that good of a move. It doesn't have a lot of things that it's super effective against. But outside of battle is actually your quick travel option. So now I can fly on any flying Pokemon back to any town that I desire, as long as I have the Thunder Badge, of course. We already obtained that a long time ago. You also can't use Flash without the Boulder Badge. I don't think I mentioned that already, but it's really weird. You get the badges for the moves way before the actual moves are usable. So, playing the Poke Flute for the sleeping Pokemon wakes it up and it attacks us. This is Snorlax, and Snorlax is one of the biggest heavy hitters in the entirety of Generation 1. Really solid Pokemon across the board. It has the best type, Normal, and it has a lot of normal type moves that it can use in its move pool. And I think all of the trainers I'm playing as are going to capture it yet again. So it's just that good. It's got some amazing moves already as well that make it actually pretty annoying to actually fight. It's got Rest, which will put it to sleep, but also heal all of its HP, so capturing it is really difficult. I typically just wait for it to go to sleep and then try to get lucky with a Great Ball. Its other moves are Amnesia, which increases Special, which is really dangerous because Special is both attack and defense. So by increasing your Special, you're not only making your Special move stronger, but your Special defense is also going up as well. And it's got Headbutt, which is not a very strong normal move, but it inflicts Flinch, so that's also noteworthy. So as for Green, he never got a bicycle, and you're actually supposed to have a bicycle for this route because it is the bike route, and what is that old man doing in the wall? That's very odd. But, Green does not have a bike, so he can't actually, well, he materialized a bike out of nowhere. At any rate, welcome to Cycling Road. This road causes you to move down automatically because it's down a slope, so it's actually really hard to go up. You're much better off starting at the top and going down, and there are a bunch of biker trainers. They mostly use poison types. I'm getting really sick of the poison types, to be honest, oddly enough. And there's also some bodies of water. We haven't really done a lot with bodies of water quite yet, but I'm sure we'll figure something out. Anyways, we just have to exit to the right, and we will be on to the next town. And this guard, fortunately, this guard seems to rightfully reprimand any non-bikers. Anyways, on the Cycling Road route, you can find Doduo, which is a sort of... I think it's supposed to be a dodo bird. Might somewhat resemble an ostrich, but I don't think it's an ostrich, really. So if you need a Pokemon that can fly, well, here you go. Even though the dodo is a flightless bird, you can teach it fly, and it will fly you across the country. It's really strange. Anyways, welcome to the next town, Fuchsia City. I guess you can imagine why it's called Fuchsia City, because the whole place is pink, at least when you're playing on Super Game Boy, because I'm emulating Super Game Boy here. On Game Boy, it is, of course, completely monochrome, which kind of takes away from the color theme that's going on here. Cerulean, Pewter, Vermilion, these are all colors, of course. And I can imagine that if the graphics were a little better, this place would be covered in cherry blossom trees, because that makes a lot of sense. Cherry blossom trees are pink, and the gym leader is a ninja, so there's that too. But before we get to that, we have some fishing to do. Here you can get the second fishing rod, the good rod, quote-unquote. You know, this is the first time I've ever seriously engaged with the fishing minigames in Pokemon, and I can't say I like it that much. You basically just select the fishing rod when you're facing water and then hope for a bite. The strangest part, however, is that the three rods work very differently than they do in later generations. So, in this generation, the old rod can only catch Magikarp, which you probably knew already, but the good rod is only capable of catching Poliwag and Goldeen, so I'm gonna catch two of them, and in fact, I need a second Poliwag for a trade later. So that's real nice, I get to do all of this fishing, and then even more once I find the final rod, the Super Rod, which can capture a wide variety of other things, so I will have to scour the entire world fishing up more stuff. That's gonna be fun. And you know something? It's actually possible to have the Super Rod by this point. You can get it before the Good Rod, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Then again, I guess that's a consequence of Generation 1 being a little more open than other generations in this series. There's actually a second Snorlax you can wake up and get past him and find some other different areas before coming here. In fact, there's an entire city that you could find before even coming to Fuchsia City in the first place, but according to the in-game badge order, you're apparently supposed to go to Fuchsia City first, then backtrack all the way to the biggest city on the map, and then come all the way back here and head south. It's really, really strange. But I've captured all of the Pokemon that I can through fishing, so I don't need to do any of that for the time being. But when I get the Super Rod, there's going to be a lot more work to do, so brace yourselves. Anyways, let's explore the city a little more. You kind of need the cut HM in order to explore here, which is rather unfortunate and completely pointless because there's no reason for that anyways. I think if you walked around the bushes, you could just explore at your own leisure without cut, but whatever. What's interesting about this city is that there is a Pokemon Zoo of sorts. You can view a bunch of signs which will give you some information about the Pokemon on display, and at the shop you can also buy Ultra Balls, which are better than Great Balls, which are a stronger Pokeball. There you go. And the Pokemon Zoo is actually interesting because they do add to your Pokédex, so if you are looking for a specific Pokemon and you don't know where to find it, you could maybe find it at the zoo, and then you will have the area it appears in recorded in your Pokédex. Also interesting is that, you remember the fossil we picked up at Mount Moon? Well, the fossil you didn't pick appears in the zoo, so that's cool too. So, let's detour to the right of Fuchsia City for just a little bit. There are some additional Pokemon we can find in the grass on this route. Chief among them is Ditto, which in battle is not really that useful. Ditto can transform itself into a copy of its opponent, which makes capturing it a little bit interesting because you have to pick the right Pokemon for it to copy. Ditto was never useful competitively in these early generations because it takes an entire turn to copy the enemy, and it copies all stats except HP as well, and Ditto's HP is not that good, so not the best Pokemon ever. Most of Ditto's uses are outside of battle, but we might get to that later. I have also captured Venonat, which is an interesting bug type, and now it's time for the Safari Zone, which is the highlight of Fuchsia City. This place is very difficult to explain, but I'll do my best. Basically, you pay 500 Pokédollars and then you have a limited amount of time wherein you can capture as many Pokemon as you want. And the battles in this area are actually not conducted in the usual manner. I don't really know why this was done, but when you get into a battle in the Safari Zone, you have three options. You can either throw a Safari Ball, which you have a limited amount of, or you can throw bait, or you can throw a rock. Now, throwing a rock will make it more likely that you actually capture the Pokemon when you throw the ball, but it also makes it more likely for the target to run away. Yeah, this is the first time that enemy wild Pokemon running away actually becomes relevant, and I really don't like it. I don't know why you can't just use your own Pokemon to fight these guys and capture them the normal way. I get putting a limit on how many you're allowed to capture, but it just really doesn't feel all that great when you actually try it. Anyways, capturing Pokemon isn't all this area is about. You are actually trying to find some hidden items as well, but you only have a limited amount of time where you can be here before you have to pay up again. You're looking for 2 items, and they're both basically in the same area, which is lucky for us. One of these is the Gold Teeth, which will be exchanged for another HM later, and you are also looking for the guy that gives you HM03. This HM lets you surf on the water, so now we can travel on the water routes. Surf is also pretty much the only good HM move in Generation 1 when you're using it in battle. It's a really strong water attack, stronger than basically anything Blastoise has learned up to this point, so I am more than happy to let it learn Surf. I can't delete Surf, but it's such a great move that I don't think I would want to anyways. There are also some Pokemon that can learn Surf even though you wouldn't think they would want to, like Rhydon can learn Surf, for example, and he's a rock ground type. He would take 4 times damage from water, but he's allowed to swim in water. It's really strange. Anyways, the HM we get from the Warden for giving his gold teeth back is the Strength HM, so now we can move boulders, which haven't really shown up yet, but there's one in its house if you want to demonstrate it. So what the Safari Zone means for Red is that we are going to have a lot of Pokemon that we need to capture, and I didn't even get all of the ones that are available at this point. I missed the 3 rarest Pokemon you can find in this park, which is unfortunate. I'm going to have to go back for that later, I suppose. It's really just incredibly annoying. I never bothered with the Safari Zone for real until now, and I can see why everyone uses a trick that we can do later on that allows you to fight these guys normally instead of having to deal with the Safari Zone battle system, because it's just incredible. Not only do you have to get lucky enough to find some of the really rare Pokemon in this area, you also have to get lucky enough to capture them before they run away. You can't weaken them to increase your odds of capturing them. It's really, really bad. This is one feature of the series that I am very happy that we have actually done away with at this point. We don't need this really crazy, luck-driven system. This game is RNG enough as it is. Anyways, there's really only one thing left in Fuchsia City to do, and that's to take on the Pokemon Gym and get another badge. The theme of the Fuchsia City Gym is invisible walls because this gym is full of ninjas. Now, viewers with a keen eye can probably spot where the invisible walls actually are, because there is a difference between a tile you can't walk on and a tile you can walk on, but in yellow version, the gym is so pink that it's actually really, really tough to see. Luckily, I've got the invisible walls memorized. The trainers here are all jugglers, which is an interesting trainer class. They're a bit unique in that they actually have a chance to switch out their Pokemon from time to time, which doesn't make much of a difference because these trainers frequently use teams of the same Pokemon anyways. And they're all using Psychic types even though this is supposed to be the Poison type gym. I mean, we're dealing with ninjas here. Ninjas, Poison type, makes a lot of sense. Come to think of it, the invisible walls don't really make much sense either, because there is a psychic type that's known for creating invisible walls, but we're in the poison gym. It doesn't make sense. By the way, this is an actual line from the game, in case anyone was in disbelief. A juggler who, quote-unquote, dropped his balls. Very funny. You know, almost as funny as the fact that nuggets in-universe are depicted as gold balls, and gold balls is kind of a euphemism for testicles in Japan, and this is getting way too Freudian. Let's move on to the gym leader. His name is Koga, and he's honestly the most boring battle in Red and Blue so far. Yellow version is a different story, but in Red and Blue, he says he uses poison and sleep techniques, but none of his Pokemon have any sleep attacks. He's definitely got poison, though. He's got 2 coughing, a muck, and a wheezing, and that's honestly really boring. I thought about bringing in a newcomer and just using Cubone to deal ground-type damage, because that's effective against poison types, and Cubone starts with a ground-type move, which is really nice. Interestingly, in the Fire Red and Leaf Green versions of the game, these poison types would not be taking any damage from ground types because they would have an ability that lets them avoid ground damage. That's very interesting. So with Green, I didn't really know what to do for this fight to make it interesting, so I just got a Hyper Beam TM from Mew. Hyper Beam is an interesting move in Generation 1. First of all, it's the most powerful normal type move in the game, but it comes with a drawback. If you do not KO your opponent with it, you are going to spend your next turn doing absolutely nothing. Now that's interesting because in every other generation, Hyper Beam makes you do absolutely nothing on your second turn no matter what, but in Generation 1, if you KO the opponent, you do not have to do that. And I don't necessarily think that's bad design either, because it makes it interesting to use. You have to confirm your KO with it, or you are getting punished for using it. It's very interesting in my opinion. Anyways, I couldn't really think of any way to make this fight interesting. Koga frequently uses self-destruct on his last Pokemon, which is exactly what it sounds like. His Pokemon will faint, but the target will almost certainly faint if they get hit, because self-destruct does a lot of damage. Speaking of lots of damage, Blue here is just sweeping the entire team with Dugtrio, who is now obedient at least. I suppose self-destruct is representative of a ninja's last resort kind of thing, but Koga should really be more careful not to use self-destruct when the enemy is burrowed underground and won't actually get hit by it. Wow! So this fight actually changes drastically in Yellow version. The first thing I should point out is that Koga has X attacks in all versions of the game, which increases the attack of the Pokemon they're used on, but in Yellow version he was given Venonat and Venomoth, which is what he used in the show, of course. But Venonat's main form of damage is the Psychic attack, which is a special attack and not a physical attack, so the X attacks are doing absolutely nothing. They were doing something on the Poison types in the Red and Blue versions because Poison is a physical type move, but here, I don't really get it, it just wastes a turn. Maybe that's a sort of concession on the developer's part because these Venonats are not to be messed with. Their levels are very, very high for where I'm at this point in the game. Not only do they have Psychic attacks, they also have Toxic, which is a move that not only inflicts poison, but causes it to do more and more damage over the course of the battle. Of course, if you switch to another Pokemon, the Toxic poison just turns back into regular poison. No need to do that, however, because Snorlax here actually has a lot of counter strategies for this fight. First of all, the Rest move not only restores all health, it also gets rid of the poison by replacing it with sleep. Isn't that interesting? And then all you have to do is play the Poke Flute to wake yourself back up, and then you're back in the fight. You can resist the Psychic attacks by using Amnesia over and over, and in this battle I used the Skull Bash TM. There's not really anything special about Skull Bash, it's another 2-turn move, but it's not really that much more powerful than Dig. In reality, I just needed another move, and Skull Bash just happened to be there, so I thought, why not? Snorlax is also pretty bulky, so he actually makes pretty good use of Rest. It's all a game of outlasting the enemy, which is going to be a bit difficult because Venomoth, at the end, has the infamous Double Team, which I really don't like. There's no way for me to get around that at this point. I haven't really picked up anything that can learn Swift or any other moves like that. And I don't have any moves to cancel Double Team either, but fortunately I got lucky and was able to close down this fight. Pretty tough, actually. The first fight in Yellow version to be significantly harder than its Red and Blue counterpart, oddly enough. But if you have Snorlax and you bring in Pikachu to actually paralyze the enemies because you definitely want to be faster than them, eventually you can get that final hit in and close down the battle. Bang! There it goes. That was very lucky on my part. But with Koga defeated, we are now able to use the Surf HM to get across water. Very interesting that they would actually give you the HM and the badge to use it in the same city for once. We have the badges for all the other HMs up to this point. And we also get a TM containing the move Toxic as well, so now we can use it for something. And I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to use it for, but that will have to wait until later. There's some very interesting things that can happen with the Toxic move. I won't spoil it for those of you who don't know, but much like many of Generation 1's other gimmicky moves, there are some interesting programming quirks you can abuse when it comes to Toxic, and we'll get to that in the later videos. I'm certain I'll be able to put it to good use at some point. Or rather, Green will. But hey, we've reached the end of yet another episode, and there are probably only like 4 or 5 more to go if I keep up this pace. So if you like what you are seeing so far, keep on watching. I'm sure I'll be able to find some ways to make the coming battles more interesting. Later, everyone.